find I have to remind myself that I am still young to finally fall asleep. My old age mocks me, knocks in my head, weighs like fragile pounds on my vision. I can't keep my eyes shut when rest asks for me.
Welcome to Creative Mornings, everyone. I'm really happy to see so many new faces in the crowd. I came to my first Creative Mornings, I think April 2018, and I never looked back. So I'm a huge fan of this morning series, and I'm really, really happy to be standing here in front of you to teach you about flow. But first, a little bit about me. You might recognize the little blonde girl in the cow costume as Corinne here, who is actually my sister. So I'm very happy to be sharing the stage with her today. If I forget my words, maybe I just look over to her and she'll inspire me. And again, most of the time I feel like this little girl in the bunny costume just trying to get through life. So again, I'm very happy to be here, sharing this with you, sharing this with all of you who are my peers in a way and who I look up to immensely. So I am a psychologist, and I studied under Dr. John Zelensky, who is the director of the Carleton University Happiness Laboratory. So our field of research and practice is called positive psychology, which means that we research what makes people grow. So the poem was really relevant. What helps people create meaning and what makes people thrive. My particular area of my specialization is the psychology of imagination and creativity. And I also teach courses at Carleton University on the psychology of creativity and play. So I really wanted to specialize in positive psychology because I was always fascinated by the immense power of human imagination. We can see, we can taste, we can hear in our imagination, we can time travel to different dimensions, different realities, we can flow. So I really wanted to help further our understanding of how imagination could be used as a positive tool to help people increase their well-being and creativity. I also really wanted to help people become more aware of their creative process, to help them feel empowered when they create and not necessarily so overwhelmed or confused by what was happening to them when they create. I apply my research through more hands-on workshops, talks, and one-on-one consulting through my business, Bevy Creative. And I co-own a music and art collective called Music Art People. So we curate immersive experiences throughout Ottawa, and we've partnered with institutions like the National Arts Centre, the Ontario Arts Council, the Ottawa Art Gallery, and Saw Gallery, to name a few. And so this is really a way for me to be involved in creative community and to just help and share space with other amazing makers and artists. And so this is definitely a way that I experience flow, mostly through community. But now for the actual reason why we all came here this early morning, to learn more about flow. And so flow is a state of mind where the sense of time will cease to exist and your sense of self will completely disappear. Most of us have experienced flow at some point in our lives, most often by accident. So for a lot of us, this comes quite randomly. Sometimes it can come while skiing down a hill, or while painting a lavish landscape, or while performing in a play. Flow as a psychological state was first studied by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who is also one of the founding fathers of positive psychology. So really for him, the big theme in his career was to understand optimal experience. So how do people get into a state of mind that really helps them grow their skills and helps them feel the best? And so throughout his 30 years of research, he really unearthed the psychological underpinnings of the state of flow. If anyone is interested in learning more about this subject, he has a great book called Flow, which is very straightforward, absolutely worth checking out. And he also has a book called Creativity on Creativity. So very straightforward titles, but amazing books to check out. Before I talk to you a little bit more about flow, however, I want to teach you about the concept of attention. So you can see attention as a beam of light that determines the contents of your consciousness. And so what you choose to shine that beam of light on or attention on will determine what you remember, what you feel, the decisions that you make, and generally what you think about. So you can think as that beam of light or of attention as one of your most important tools for improving the quality of your experience. Attention is important because the state of flow is a state of consciousness that is determined by what you choose to pay attention to and how long you pay attention to it. Flow is also called optimal experience because attention is focused on goals that are important for the self. So when your attention is focused on these things, experience is ordered, or there is order in consciousness. Experience just flows very smoothly. You might experience disorder in consciousness if you focus, or if your attention is focused on things that actually contradict your goals or stop you from carrying them out, like pain, fear, anger, anxiety, and boredom. In fact, anxiety and boredom are also states of consciousness that are determined by what you choose to pay attention to and how long you pay attention to it. So entering the state of flow can have really powerful benefits for both your well-being and for creativity. So every time that you are in the flow state, you grow your skills just a little bit more. So next time that you want to experience flow, the situation has to be just a little bit more challenging. Flow also makes the present moment really enjoyable, and it increases self-confidence because you are growing your skills, you're getting better. In flow, because there is that less of that sense of self and that sense of time, it also makes more room in your consciousness for really subtle sensations or emotions to now be the focus of your awareness. You can also have some really interesting ideas associate and pop up into consciousness during flow. And so your sense of self is that, that chatter, I am, I want, I wonder, I remember. In 10 minutes I have to be here. Yesterday I said this. And most of our daydreams and most of our mental chatter has to do with ourselves and time. And so when your mind is finally freed of that, there is just a lot of really rich information that can pop up and fuel creativity. Because of this, I'm such an advocate for getting everybody into the flow state more often in their lives. So it's not necessarily a state that just has to happen so randomly or so mysteriously to some of us. Although there's really no one-size-fits-all way, I wish I could just tell everyone, do this and you'll absolutely get into flow. There's no one-size-fits-all way of getting into flow. There are still some things that you can put in place to to experience that state a little bit more often. First of all, you have to choose a task or an activity that is really simple, that has a simple goal and that has simple rules. If the rules or the goal are too complex or too ambiguous, you're going to start doing the activity and then you're going to start to wonder, am I actually doing this right? What's happening? And then you start to focus on yourself again and suddenly you're out of flow. So a very simple goal like skiing down a hill is pretty simple with simple rules of putting on 2 skis and sliding. That's very straightforward. And now your attention can be fully focused on the present moment and on the task. You also have to have a good challenge to skill match. And now a challenging situation doesn't have to be objectively challenging. You have to perceive the situation as challenging. So an objective challenge is like climbing Mount Everest. I think most of us can agree is challenging. But a subjective challenge or a perceived challenge could be talking to strangers. For some person, that might not be challenging, but for someone else, they might perceive that as extremely challenging. You also have to perceive your skills as high enough to meet that challenge. So once you have high skill and high perceived challenge, you experience flow. If the challenge is perceived as too high and the skills are too low, then you might experience anxiety. And if the challenge is too low and your skills are too high, then you might actually experience boredom. Getting feedback is also super important. Now, feedback might come in the form of someone, standing behind you and cheering you on and telling you you're doing a good job. But it can also be a little bit more subtle. Like emotions, like pleasantness and fun are really great ways of getting feedback from the situation. If you're having fun while skiing down that hill, most likely you're still standing on your skis, you haven't fallen, and you're sliding and you're doing a good job. Your actions are achieving your goal. But if you're actually in pain, or if you're fearful, or you're experiencing negative emotions, then it's likely an indicator that your actions are not achieving your goal. So just being in tune with your emotions allows you to just be in the present moment again and to get that feedback that you're on the right track. This is something we all struggle with, I think, especially in this digital age, is to remove all distractions. So, all of us with phones in our pockets all the time, with a ringer on, you might not experience flow if you're getting a text or you're getting a call. You want to make sure that your consciousness or your attention is not segmented between many different things, but that you're hyper-focused on what you have to do. If your activity is to paint, then you're hyper-focused on what you have to paint. Like, I think Ko's experienced flow over there too. Yeah? Okay, so see, she doesn't have any other, well, no, there's a lot of distractions, so this is not a good example at all. But you want to make sure that your attention is, that beam of light is shining on one activity. Playful activities are a really good way of at least initiating yourself with the flow state, because they have a very simple goal of having fun. Of course, some play activities could be a little bit more, the goal could be a bit more specific, but I think we can all agree that, when you're playing, having fun is a goal in and of itself. You're also getting that direct feedback from the situation. If you're having fun, then you're playing. If you're not having fun, then you're not playing. So it's pretty straightforward. You don't really have to overthink that. And the activity is motivating in and of itself. It's really easy to get into it, and it's really easy to focus your attention on the present moment. I really love using play as a way of at least initiating people to the flow state of mind. What I like to use is activities that focus on bodily sensations like touch or seeing bright colors or even movement. And I find that focusing on bodily sensation really helps people's attention kind of grab onto something. If the activity is too abstract, then our attention tends to go back into our daydreams, and then we're back into our sense of self. So focusing on one bodily sensation can be quite grounding and help focus attention. This is called embodied cognition, and my favorite embodied activities are playing with modeling clay or using finger painting because you're actually touching the paint, or blindfolded dancing. Now, I know, blindfolded dancing, I blindfold people at first, they really don't like it, but then their self-consciousness goes way down, and then they can just focus on their body moving through space and through the music, and it can take a while to warm up, but it is quite powerful. And I really, really wanted to blindfold all of you today, but I figured that 200 people blindfolded might be a bit chaotic or dangerous, so we're not going to do that today, unfortunately, I know. But instead, we're going to do an embodied meditation. Because of our imagination is so grand and so powerful, we can actually imagine our senses. So that's called mental imagery. So what we're going to do in the meditation is really imagine each one of our senses one at a time. And although I can't guarantee that you'll get into flow because I don't know what your perceived challenge and skills necessarily are, I'm hoping that for some people it'll be easier to imagine taste and sight, and other people might be easier to hear and smell in their imagination. So we'll go through all of the senses together, and then we'll do a little free writing exercise. Oh yeah, I have a slide about the meditation. Okay, so yeah, our goal is very simple, to close your eyes and breathe. Our challenge and skill will be your ability to form these mental images in your mind, and the feedback that you're getting is the content of your imagination. So if your imagination is very blank, then you might know that you're having a bit more trouble forming the mental images, and if your imagination is very vivid, then that tells you that you're achieving the goal. All right. So I'll get everyone to please close your eyes. Because there's so many of us here today and a lot of cameras, I think the only way to not have any distractions is with our eyes closed. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you could also focus them on the floor in front of you just softly. Just soften your gaze. Find a comfortable position and take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Relax your jaw and your shoulders. Take another deep breath in and another deep breath out. Keep your breathing slow and relaxed. Now imagine looking at a flower. What color is it? See the petals, the leaves, the stem. Imagine looking at the flower from very close up. See the fine details of the flower, including any texture in the petals, drops of water, or grains of pollen. Now let's move on to one of our other senses, hearing. Imagine the sound of waves washing to shore. What does it sound like? Now imagine the sound of rain on a roof. What does each drop sound like as it lands? Is the sound far away, or is it close up? Now let's move on to our sense of smell. You're now walking through a forest surrounded by pine trees. Take a deep breath in. What do the trees smell like? What about the earth beneath your feet? Look around you in the forest. Is there anything else that appears in your imagination that you might want to smell? The bark of the tree, the leaves on the ground. Now let's move on to our sense of taste. Imagine that your favorite food has just appeared in front of you. Take a bite out of it or a sip from it. What does it taste like? Take a moment to really enjoy the taste. Maybe as I'm talking, there's a second thing that popped into your mind. So if that's the case, what does that taste like? Are you smelling and tasting at the same time? Now for a sense of touch. Imagine a tub of warm water. Imagine placing your bare feet into the tub of water. The water is pleasantly hot. Feel the warm water on your feet all the way up to your ankles. Now put the rest of your body in the water. What does it feel like against your skin? You can also move your fingers on the top of the water. What does that feel like? Finally, let's explore movement. Imagine lying in a hammock that is gently swaying. Feel the slight movement from left to right, calming and repetitive movement. How does your body feel as it sways slowly above the ground? Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Sway some more. Now gently open your eyes and refamiliarize yourself with the room and the people around you. Now everybody has a little card and a pen or a pencil on their chair And what I'd like us to do is some free writing about your experience with the meditation. So I have a prompt here on the screen, which asks you, did you experience flow during the meditation? If so, what was your experience like? And if not, why do you think that is? I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and I encourage you to follow this prompt. But if you find any that you have writer's block or you just don't know what to write, I encourage you to write whatever's going on in your mind anyway. So it could be, this is really stupid, I hate writing, it's too early in the morning, I can't even form thoughts right now, I can't believe we're doing this. Please write it down. You might circle back to the prompt, or you might also just become more aware of an emotion you're feeling, which is good in and of itself. So I'll set my timer for 2 minutes. Please don't focus on the time, and I'll let you know when the time is over. If you have a phone and prefer typing it on your notes, that's also a possibility. All right, please finish your sentence or your idea. You can keep writing too as I talk. I'm not going to stop. I'm never going to stop anyone from writing. So some important take-home messages about flow, or about what we just learned, is that the feeling that you should have when you are in the flow state. You might definitely have, the sense of time will disappear, so time might feel like it's standing still or like it's going very, very fast, but you won't be focused on, oh, has it been 5 minutes, has it been 10 minutes? You won't have that focus. And you won't have a sense of self, your self-concept will be gone, so you won't be aware of your values, your perceptions, your beliefs. But you might be hyper-focused on your body. You might have a hyper-focus on one of your sensations if the activity calls for that. Or you might actually feel completely dissociated from your body. Oftentimes this can happen if you're painting or you're writing a story and suddenly you're absorbed in the world that you're creating. You might come out of that flow state and realize that you're super hungry, you're dehydrated, and you really have to go to the bathroom, and you can't believe that you didn't realize that. So that is a dissociation from your body when you're in flow. So either a hyperfocus or a dissociation might happen. Because flow requires an awareness of the perceived challenge of the situation and perceived skills, it really requires a lot of introspection. You have to know what you perceive, you have to know what your goals are, what situations do you find challenging, what situations do you find fun and pleasurable at the same time. So that, for a lot of us, introspection can feel a little bit daunting maybe, or maybe it's really fun, but it definitely is useful if you want to make flow a bigger part of your daily life. And so journaling or talking to other people or just exploring your inner self, honestly, I did a lot of research on daydreaming. Just sitting down and letting your mind wander is not a bad thing at all. So if you have the time to just put your devices away, your books away, and just sit with yourself, that can be quite helpful. Flow, again, should be part of our creative hygiene. It's just a state that allows us to tap into something that is much bigger than ourselves. When our sense of self is paused or put on pause, and we tune into the present moment can become quite grand. It can feel quite expansive, and that experience in and of itself can be humbling or incredibly inspiring. And flow also helps us grow our skills, and it helps us become more aware of our emotions, because they're they can finally pop up into awareness. And it can help remove creative barriers like negative perceptions of self and fear of failure. So I hope that I made a strong case for engaging in flow a little bit more in your lives. That's it.
Thanks for the presentation. It was very, very interesting. I work in a creative field, and I feel that anxiety can be a big blocker for creative activities. And you talked about like challenge and perceived challenge and skill. But I was wondering like what the role of judgment is in, like, because sometimes you overestimate your skills and then you're disappointed, or you underestimate and then you can't even like overcome the anxiety and realize that you do have that skill.
That's a really good point, actually, and I guess that makes a stronger case even for starting that introspection in a playful way, for getting into activities that are, first of all, maybe perceived as somewhat challenging, but also very playful. There are cards, so I did put cards on all of your chairs, and on the other side there are little activities like improv exercises or draw your partner exercises that can make people quite uncomfortable. It can create anxiety, but it's meant to be fun. And so to start to, I guess, practice being in those more high stakes, perceived high stakes situation using play, because really when you're playing you can't fail. You might feel self-conscious, which is a huge barrier, like you're saying, or have these negative perceptions of yourself. But the more you engage in those behaviors, the easier it gets. It's like any habit, right? You're just forming a habit of creativity in a way, or a habit of being gentle with yourself when you are in challenging situation, and know that you're engaging in that situation to grow. And that growth, we have to shed layers, so it might hurt a little.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was like so informative to really understand the concept of flow. My question is, I find that in the work environment, we have a lot of distractions, and it can be very stressful, and we can have a lot of pressure to perform. How do you think this concept could be introduced more in the professional field? Especially when you are supposed to be in a creative position where you have to come up with ideas, you need to be in that flow state, right? So that things can, come up more easily. So what would your view of this be in the professional area?
I've thought about this problem quite a lot over the past few years, and one of the things that I do, especially in consulting work, is working with people in the workplace and trying to teach them about what a play space is. Again, if the workplace culture is not down with that, if I put it in that way, then it does become a little bit harder to do it within the workplace itself. At work, especially when you're entering flow or you're entering any playful activity, you don't want to have the pressure of having to produce something of value after that. You want to get into it just for the sake of it, and something usually comes out of it, but it's not always so in your face. It's not always like, this is it, this is the idea, this is the product, this is the service. It takes more time, and it takes, again, I call it a hygiene, because it's just a habit. So if your workplace can leave maybe like a physical space for flow to happen, with different objects or different coloring stations or music that can be playing, you know, all these things that can help people get into that state can be quite helpful. And it really has to come from the leadership in the company in and of itself that says, okay, when people are in that space, they're in that space to flow, they're in that space to tap into their creative juices, but we don't expect them to come out of there with anything necessarily. And that can be a bit counterintuitive in a way, for sure.
Hi, thank you very much for such a beautiful talk. My question is, I was just wondering what you yourself do to get into flow. You mentioned in your consulting work finger painting and silly putty, but you yourself, do you have a particular routine or particular things that really work for you? Just curious.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I have a few things that can help me get into flow. One of them is very straightforward. It's yoga. It's like literally a flow. And so that really helps me get outside of my head and flow. I love to dance. I've always loved to dance. So for me, that as soon as you get music going, gets me into the state of flow and writing, because I just adore writing. I put, again, lo-fi beats on, some like really chill music, and I just really, that helps me really get into my zone. So things that for me that are just very enjoyable and intrinsic.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. So you were mentioning about introspection being really important to get to a state of flow. I live with a 4-year-old who's not so great at introspection, but he's fantastic at flow. So I was just wondering, what is it that we can learn from kids? Because it seems to be a state that they can achieve a bit easier than we do. Is that simply because their sense of self and identity is different at that age? Or is there something else that we can learn from them?
Absolutely, we can learn a lot from kids. And one, you already mentioned, one of the things is their sense of self is a little bit different than ours. They're still a little bit more connected to their environment or to even their bodily sensations. So they're very sensation-based little people. But also, and an interesting thing actually is that most of our daydreaming when we're adults actually is play when we're kids, and so we say it out loud. So you're playing house, or you're playing, you're a pack of wolves, and suddenly that's what you are, and you adopt that identity very easily. And all of these things might now go on silently inside of our minds, but kids are very just verbal about it. So all of the things that are still in us are very outwards with kids. And so just seeing how they explore, and they explore, they don't care. If, you know, they turn over a rock and it's full of worms, like maybe they're like, ugh, but they're not like, oh, I'm not going to turn over the rock because I don't want to get dirty. You know, most kids, I guess there's differences in personality, but just that outwardness and that curiosity and that motivation to just approach things in a very, they have awe and they're fascinated. So it's possible, like we could be fascinated. I'm fascinated by that rainbow curtain over there. It's amazing. You know, it's flowing in the wind and it's very simple. So just maybe tuning into those little things can help us regain that childish way of seeing the world. It's still in us for sure.
Bon matin. En fait, je me demandais si tu pensais que finalement flow, c'était un peu comme un sixième sens, because we were talking about, I don't know, the smell, the taste, hearing, touching. So I don't know if you thought that flow was the sixth sense of our body.
I'll answer in English just so that we all understand. But flow, I guess that's a really cool question. I guess it could be a sixth sense, or I see it as maybe like a sense incubator. Like all of our senses get into flow and then suddenly they're really, really enhanced. And maybe they might merge together to form like a super powerful sixth sense, maybe. You could definitely see it that way. But it's definitely a space that you can get into to finally make your senses come to life, for sure.
Okay, last question.
I was curious to know if you've ever tried, or if we could like hack a bad habit with this. Like if we could just find pleasure in, you know, like Mary Poppins says, there's like pleasure in every work that has to be done, but it feels like it's something we could do. Have you ever done it or had clients do this?
So I just want to make sure I understood the question correctly, is that can we find pleasure in unpleasurable things?
Can we train ourselves to find flow in things that don't bring us, that bring us anxiety or dread, or like
Yeah.
getting the job done, but so it's just a way of changing your perspective?
That's it, perspective. It's all about perspective. So if there's a situation that brings you anxiety, it's probably because you do perceive that situation as quite challenging and too challenging for your skills to match. And so if you just change your perception of yourself and of your skills, then you could meet that situation in more of a flow-like manner. But I guess a way to reach that more incrementally is probably the best way to do it. So get a situation that makes you feel really, really anxious, and then find something that is like 5 levels down to meet you at where you are, and then see if you experience flow. And then next time, it might be a little bit more challenging, and then engage in that activity until you can finally reach that top goal without feeling so anxious.